time for the best coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
On a Friday, and good to have you with us. 60 minutes, a lot to jam in. Tino Pattigno, it's Friday. That means a NASCAR Friday with our friend Tino Pattigno, SiriusXM NASCAR contributor and our betting insider. Have his best picks for you for this week's race in New Hampshire. Recap what happened in Iowa last weekend. I ain't gonna lie, I didn't watch. I was in Vegas and then watching the U.S. Open, so I didn't get to see a lot of the racing last week, just the highlights of it, like a lot of you probably saw. So we'll get into that. Kurt Helin will join us in 10 minutes. We'll spend a couple of segments with him. The NBA, JJ Redick, new head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. Shams Charania had it right. It took a wild, weird sort of road to get to that point, but ultimately, Shams Charania said JJ Redick would be the next head coach of the Lakers, and he was. So hats off to Shams Charania. He got it right. And now everybody else is sort of following. But there are other coaching vacancies still left to be filled. So how does the Redick hire impact those? What does the offseason look like? We'll get into all of it with our friend Kurt Helin of Pro Basketball Talk at NBCSports.com. And we'll finish the show with a note on, well, an interesting contract dispute going on. Not in sports, but in sports media. I'll give you my thoughts on that coming up in Odds and Ends. But I want to start things out with what took place, the Rick Wood tribute game that took place on Thursday night in Birmingham, Alabama, Rick Wood Field. Giants and Cardinals played. And the result of the game is relatively inconsequential in terms of the significance of Major League Baseball holding this event and bringing baseball and taking center stage in a place like Birmingham, given its cultural significance and what it meant as baseball's oldest stadium. But out of everything that impacted me from last night, and the broadcast was great, and you know the discussions surrounding the history of the field were great, but it was a conversation that took place before the game started that got my attention the most. Reggie Jackson talking with the guys on the set, Alex Rodriguez, Derek Jeter, David Ortiz, Kevin Burkhardt, sharing a story about his time playing in Birmingham. I want you to listen to this because I think it's very important. It's a couple of minutes long, so you have to bear with me. And for some, there might be some content in here that is sensitive in nature, so I will warn you in advance. But listen to Reggie Jackson describing his experiences playing in Birmingham and playing in baseball early on in his career.
Alex, when people ask me a question like that, it's like coming back here is not easy. The racism that I played here, when I played here, the difficulty of going through different places where we traveled. Fortunately, I had a manager and I had players on the team that helped me get through it. But I wouldn't wish it on anybody. People said to me today, I spoke, and they said, you think you're a better person? You think you won when you played here in Concord? I said, you know, I would never want to do it again. I walked into restaurants and they would point at me and said, can't eat here. I would go to a hotel and they say, then can't stay here. We went to Charlie Finley's country club for a welcome home dinner, and they pointed me out with the N-word. He can't come in here. Finley marched the whole team out. Finally, they let me in there. He said, we're going to go to the diner and eat hamburgers. We'll go where we're wanted. Fortunately, I had a manager, Johnny McNamara, that if I couldn't eat in the place, nobody would eat. We'd get food to travel. If I couldn't stay in a hotel, they'd drive to the next hotel and find a place where I could stay. Had it not been for Raleigh Fingers, Johnny McNamara, Dave Duncan, Joe and Sharon Rudy, I slept on their couch 3-4 nights a week for about a month and a half. Finally, they were threatened that they would burn our apartment complex down unless I got out. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. The year I came here, Bull Connor was the sheriff the year before. And they took minor league baseball out of here because in 1963, the Klan murdered 4 black girls, children, in 11, 12, 14 years old at a church here and never got indicted. They were from the Klan. Life magazine did a story on them like they were being honored. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. At the same time, had it not been for my white friends, had it not been for a white manager, and Rudy, Fingers, and Duncan, and Lee Myers, I would have never made it. I was too physically violent. I was ready to physically fight some. I'd have got killed here because I'd have beat someone's ass, and you'd have saw me in an oak tree somewhere.
Wow. I mean, that is powerful stuff from Reggie Jackson. And I thought it was important that people hear that today, because I could sit here and talk about, as a white man, as a white 46-year-old, I could sit here and have a conversation with you about this, but I can't have that conversation. I can't give you that kind of context. And think about it. That was 50 years ago. And we all like to think that we've come a long way in terms of diversity and changing mindsets and moving away from certain types of thinking that permeated society just 50 years ago. But it's not humanly possible. And that's the biggest point I want to make out of all of this. Great, the Cardinals beat the Giants 6-5. It's a regular season baseball game. And it was important for Major League Baseball to do this and to bring baseball to this location and to celebrate this location. But it's also important to remember that while we've come so far, we still have so much further to go. 50 years in the history of this country is but just a tiny speck in time. And it isn't realistic to believe that we are clean and free and clear of the racism from 50 years ago now. Why? Because we had a black president? There is still so much further to go and so much more work to do. This was a great step. But if you know anything about baseball right now, you know there is still a long way to go. We're coming back with Kurt Helin next.
Over 13 million Americans were affected by identity theft in 2022, and the threats go way beyond just credit card fraud. Today's identity thieves can use your information in ways that are easy to miss by just monitoring accounts and credit, like opening loans, transferring home titles, even committing crimes.
Someone got my social security number, made a driver's license, and it was used for criminal activity.
You can do so much with a social security number that I didn't know could happen. They drained my bank account. It was terrifying.
You're even more vulnerable than you realize. Your information is exposed through online shopping, banking, even corporate data breaches. No wonder there's a new victim of identity theft every 3 seconds. Only LifeLock alerts you to the widest volume of threats all in one place, like someone trying to use your social security number, open a new loan in your name, or even commit a crime in your name.
There was a big yes button and there was a big no button. I clicked, "That's not me," and LifeLock took it from there.
If you become a victim of identity theft, a dedicated U.S.-based restoration specialist will be assigned to your case and work to fix the issue on your behalf.
If something happens, you have somebody fighting for you.
All LifeLock members are backed by the LifeLock $1 Million Protection Package, including reimbursement for stolen funds, personal expenses, and coverage for lawyers and experts up to $1 million. It can be dangerously easy to steal your identity. With LifeLock, it's easy to help protect yourself.
I will be with LifeLock forever.
Join the millions of people already protected by LifeLock. And for a limited time, save 25% on your first year with promo code 25TV. All plans include a 60-day money-back guarantee. Call 800-710-7531 or visit lifelock.com/25TV to save 25% on your first year of identity theft protection. Enroll now.
Attention families with a loved one in a nursing home. If your loved one has suffered from bed sores, falls, broken bones, dehydration, or even death, you may be entitled to a substantial settlement. If you have a loved one who is injured in a nursing home, we will find out what happened. State violations are found against nursing homes every day. You have a limited time to file your claim, so don't wait. Call 800-398-5999 and speak with one of our attorneys. The call is confidential and free.
This Friday edition of Sports Wrap continues. Sam Yarnell with the day off. Tino Pattigno will drop by in 20 minutes. It's a NASCAR Friday, so we'll have a preview of this week's race in New Hampshire with him. We'll recap what happened in Iowa last weekend as well. All right, let's do some NBA talk. Our good friend Kurt Helin drops by the show. Pro basketball talk at NBCSports.com is his jam. And before we send him off into the off-season sunset, hopefully give him a day or two off, a week or two off. I don't know. Do you get any time off, or is this just it just nonstop because of the Olympics, the draft, the summer league?
Yeah, there's not much. I'm actually taking a little bit of a vacation between summer league and the start of the Olympics, but the Olympics certainly mess with the timing of Kurt getting to relax, because normally it's about mid to late July, everything finally winds down.
But you're not going to Paris, right? And you don't have to worry about that.
I will not be in Paris, no.
Yeah, you know what? You'll probably be better off for it. So JJ Redick is going to be the head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. Sham Charania had it, then he didn't have it, then Dan Hurley had the job, it looked like, if he wanted it, and then the season ended and Hurley didn't want the job and Redick took the job, so now it's going to be JJ Redick. Tell me why it works. If it's going to work, tell me why it works.
JJ's knows the game X's and O's wise, and if he can be a coaching personality that can connect the players, get them to buy in, puts them in good situations, like, it works because he grows into this job in a year. It's the first year is going to have bumps, but you could try to use the Joe Mazzulla example. He was thrust into a much weirder situation because of what was going on in Boston, and a better team, frankly. But bumps and bruises the first year, much better second year. And you're hoping for that kind of growth from Redick. But if it works, it's going to be largely because Rob Pelinka did something really smart with the roster this offseason, whatever that might be. I don't care how good Redick is or isn't. If this team isn't better, they're going to be a play-in team that gets bounced in the first round again.
I'm trying to rack my brain in recent memory to prominent players that have been successful head coaches. And maybe there's one that I'm missing. Maybe, but I don't think of that many. Jason Kidd. All right, Jason Kidd, true. Hasn't won a title as a coach, but Jason Kidd is one.
I think
Monty Williams played in the league a little bit.
But Monty Williams was a role player. And I think generally, much like used to be catchers in baseball or whatever, like, it's not the stars who can do this. Redick built himself into one of the best role players in the league, but had to reshape his body, had to reshape his game. And then that's really the question for me with him. I'm not questioning that he knows X's and O's and where he wants to put guys and right adjustments to make. Knowing it, writing it on a whiteboard, and coaching it, teaching it are different things. Same with player development, right? Like, he knew what he had to do. He understands what's got to happen for a person to develop into a quality NBA player. Teaching it is something else. And I will find out if he can do that. And I think Kidd is a good analogy in this sense. Kidd coached the team to the finals this year, made great adjustments, was fantastic the last couple of years in Dallas. He had some rough start, man. Like, are the Lakers going to be patient when it's a rough start for JJ?
And inevitably, that will always happen at some point. There's going to be ups and downs. And are the Lakers in it for the long haul with him? Because they haven't been in it for the long haul with anybody.
No, that's the thing. And I think here's why I think it might be different this time. When that axe swings at Redick, if and when that axe swings at Redick, it's hitting Pelinka. If this is his third coaching hire, if he misses again, if you're Jeannie Buss, you have to reconsider your power structure.
I'll be curious to see if they get buy-in on from Anthony Davis, too. I think that's the huge question mark. This is LeBron's guy. Obviously, we know him and LeBron like each other. But right. Anthony Davis is going to be here long after LeBron, assuming he stays. He's got a couple years left on his deal.
Right.
The question to me is to whether or not Anthony Davis buys in to the idea of JJ Redick. And did they have to have that buy-in before they even decided to hire him, or is this going to be an ever-going, sort of ongoing project for JJ Redick to get the buy-in from Anthony Davis? Those are really great questions, and you've heard mixed things about how much Anthony Davis is on board. I think he's willing, especially with LeBron's endorsement, and of course LeBron didn't say it, reiterated, no, didn't even talk to them about the coaching situation. In no way, you're right. He absolutely had some influence on this, and it doesn't happen if it's not somebody he wants. If Anthony Davis had not wanted JJ Redick for some reason, it wouldn't have happened. So they've at least got the emperor's thumbs up here, keeping that buy-in. Look, he bought it. Darvin Ham had buy-in the first year. Keeping that buy-in is you're right. That's going to be the job. Give me the sort of path here now for the Cavaliers. Is it JJ Borrego or bust?
Borrego was their guy. They're in trouble now because the surprising Monty Williams firing changes the dynamic. Not just for Monty Williams, who now gets $67 million to go sip Mai Tais on a beach somewhere. By the way, I love that there were Laker fans who were like, he's going to come here. I'm like, dude just got $67 million not to coach. You think he wants that, to step into that? Trajan Langdon, the new GM in Portland, new president of basketball operations, not Portland, I'm sorry, for the Pistons in Detroit, is out of New Orleans, where Borrego is an assistant. There is a relationship there. Borrego's going to get, I don't want to say get to choose, but he is being courted by both, and he will have some options. And then both of those teams have to have backups. I know that the Pistons are interviewing, a lot of top assistants, Mike Honori, Johnny Bryant out of the Knicks, Sweeney. There's a few guys getting interviewed there that they're looking as backups. I'm not sure what Cleveland's backup are. They've moved very deliberately. But if they don't get Borrego, where do they go? Because they want to win now, and it's got to be somebody Donovan Mitchell buys in with. So, do you have to find Kenny Atkinson? I don't know where they go. I thought they'd kind of settled in on Borrego, and they may have to up their offer to make sure that he takes it. Kurt Helin's going to hang out with us for one more segment, only because we've bolted him to the chair, and he's not allowed to move. And I gotta wring out every last drop of Kurt Helin knowledge that I can get before we get into this off season. Kurt Helin, my conversation with him continues on this Friday edition of Sports Wrap. Don't go anywhere. Tino Pattigno drops by in 10 minutes. NASCAR Friday on Sports Wrap. Sam has the day off. So I called in some friends to help out with the show, like this guy, Kurt Helin. Pro Basketball Talk at NBCSports.com. Talked about the coaching off-season that is ahead. Be a lot of potential player movement as well, Kurt Helin, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, a thought on the Celtics, because I haven't talked to you since the end of the NBA Finals. I talked about it with Noah Dalzell, who covers the team for SB Nation, and had her on the show the day after the finals. And I asked her the same question I'll ask you. Where did we all get it wrong with the Celtics? Not that they're not a good team or a great team, but that they were this great a team. Where did we, and by we, I mean people that maybe picked against them in the finals or thought this would be a more competitive finals. Where did we get it wrong? First off, I don't think Dallas ended up being as good. I think the matchup was just terrible for them. They were able to, no team had really been able to just keep one guy on the ball with Luka and live with it and make them scores the way Dallas was able to and really challenge. I mean, Boston was able to. And I think this is the second straight year where Denver was really great in the regular season. We're like, I don't know, man. Maybe we should be listening to the regular season a little bit more where, hey, these teams are proving it over the course. There's always, though, this you haven't done it till you've done it thing. And then Celtics fans hate this. We didn't really see them pushed in the playoffs. We didn't see them. And I don't mean to take anything away from the title, but there weren't the dramatic games. They didn't have to have buzzer beaters to win. They kind of steamrolled everybody in I think Bill Simmons used the 2007 Spurs analogy. Like, yeah, they just crushed everybody. They were just simply better than everybody. They were a very good team, better than everybody, and nobody rose up to really challenge them. So I think we slept on it a little because we didn't see them have to hit that gear. And when they did, and they did anyway against Dallas, they looked, like I said, they just dominated them. They owned that series.
When I see them coming out of the East, the argument I can make for them being able to go on a run, 2 or 3 titles in 3 or 4 years or 4 or 5 years. The argument is the conference that they play in. It's harder to do that, obviously, with Denver. Do you see the same potential path to, not a dynasty, but certainly a run of greatness that puts this group sort of, in special company?
I think so. Look, they've got the potential. Like you said, they're in a conference where, look, there's going to be more challenges next year.
Sure.
Teams will get better. They got Giannis Antetokounmpo will probably be healthy, and that's a matchup interesting. Orlando's getting better and spending this offseason. They've got cap space. We'll see what happens with Philadelphia, but if they find a wing to put between Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, suddenly they are there are threats out there. But they're bringing the full top 8 back. They're balanced. They know who they are. They've got their star players at their peak. Guys are accepting roles. There's no reason that they can't make the finals 3 out of the next 4 years and win 1 or 2 more and put themselves in good spot. Like they're in position to do that if, health and everything kind of holds up for them. Where you're right, by the way, the West is a gauntlet. The West, nobody is going to come out of Denver might. It's such a rock, paper, scissors matchup thing in the West, right? Where it's like, hey, Denver can't beat Minnesota, but Denver could have beaten Dallas and probably given Boston more. Like, it's just, and now you're throwing in Oklahoma City. Memphis gets everybody back healthy. Like, it's just going to be a bear in the West next year.
Tell me what you believe, assuming LeBron stays with the Lakers, which I think given this coaching hire, we'd all assume is going to happen. What is the most interesting player situation in terms of potential movement you're watching? Is it Paul George?
Yeah. I think Paul George is the biggest domino out there, right? Well, Donovan Mitchell, but he's expected to resign in Cleveland. Paul George is the one that's still out there that isn't finding what he wants. There's now buzz that Philadelphia is less interested. I don't know if that's negotiations or if they've generally said they're not going to make the kind of offer that he's looking for. He's 34. He wants at least 4 years. The Clippers have more like 3 on the table. Is Orlando, is somebody else willing to give him that 4th year? So we'll see. I think he's the first big domino, and with him falls all the other interesting ones. Brandon Ingram, teams that Philadelphia struck out. Now they start talking about Brandon Ingram on the wing instead of Joel, on that wing. Orlando is out there looking at guys. Where does Zach LaVine go? There's other big wings, but to me, Paul George is the first domino that has to fall for kind of all that to come together.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask a Knicks-related question because we're all in New York all the time in my brain. Julius Randle potentially being moved?
It's if they had the right, he would be the guy if a star does come up that they want. And I'm not even sure Donovan Mitchell's that guy, but if somebody comes available, they're still looking for that star. If there's still nothing against Jalen Brunson, but if another top, and I don't know where you'd rank Brunson in the top 10, but if another top 10 player comes up that fits, they'll make the move, and you might have to move Randall to get a guy like that. Their immediate concern now has to be OG Anunoby, who everybody kind of thought was going to be a lock to sign there, isn't now. Philadelphia strikes again. If Philadelphia is not getting Paul George, I'm looking at OG Anunoby pretty hard. Right? I might like him better than Brandon Ingram because he defends and is kind of two-way. They're going to have to pony up to re-sign him, and that's going to cost and hope nobody comes over the top because they can only offer so much. There's a limit to what they can offer him because of the way the CBA works.
The draft is right around the corner. It sounds like Atlanta's going to hang on to that top pick.
Yeah. It looks like that, but nobody's sure where they're going to go yet. And by the way, it looks like that. They're still taking calls. They're still like this. If somebody comes through with a big number, or if it's part of a really big Trae Young, DeJounte Murray trade, it could happen. I'm not ready to rule that out because there's not somebody at the top of this draft that they feel they have to have. And there's this Donovan. I think they're trying to generate buzz by saying they might take Donovan Clingan out of UConn because there's a lot of teams farther down that really like him as the guy that could get fourth or fifth. So now they're trying to find somebody who will trade up to get him.
My God. Is this draft? I mean, I'm a UConn guy. I didn't go there, but I mean, I'm from Connecticut.
Yeah.
Donovan Clingan? I mean, really? I mean, that's what we're talking about at the top of this draft?
I want to wish him better than this, but it's the 2013 draft to me, where Anthony Bennett went 1. The best guy in the top 5 was Victor Oladipo.
Wow.
But that's also a draft that gave us Giannis Antetokounmpo and Rudy Gobert and CJ McCollum. Somebody good is coming out of this draft. It's just, I'm going to be surprised if it's top 3.
Kurt Helin, Pro Basketball Talk at NBCSports.com. Kurt, I always appreciate it, my friend. Be well. We'll talk soon.
Take care, my man.
Good to have you with us on this Friday edition of Sports Wrap. Be joined by Tino Pattigno in a moment. Thanks again to Kurt Helin. They can't see you. You're off camera. Get to you in a second. Stay where you are. Good talking to Kurt Helin. He tells me he can talk until like mid-July, and then he's getting on a cruise. So I'm sure we'll have some more Kurt Helin during the NBA offseason because there's going to be a lot of NBA offseason news. Also, a reminder, go and check out the podcast. Sports Wrap with Jason Page podcast. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch us over on the Spotify version of it. Also available on Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, as I said. Where else can we get? iHeartRadio, TuneIn. Anywhere you get your podcasts, you can check out this show. And when you do, you will see this man or hear this man. It's Friday on Sports Wrap. And what does that mean, Tino Pattigno? It's a NASCAR Friday. We got you all set up. We got you all set up. Between the two of us, people must be looking and going, who is picking out these guys' fashion? We got you with the gold jacket on. Me, it's the first day of summer. This is the first day of summer shirt. It's got all the representations of summer. We love Penguin clothing, by the way. They are not sponsoring the show, but you will notice I wear a lot of Penguin on this show. So I got to be honest. I got to plead total ignorance on the Iowa 350 because I was in Vegas last weekend, as I may have said to people. We're doing some things there, relocating the show there in August. So I was in Vegas looking at places, meetings, things like that. Then driving back from Vegas, I was watching the end of the U.S. Open with Rory McIlroy imploding against Bryson DeChambeau down the stretch of that. So I didn't see the Iowa 350. I'm going to be completely honest with the audience. I could fake it till I make it and make it sound like I watched the race and ask all sorts of fancy questions. So I will ask you, what did I miss with the Iowa 350 and NASCAR making its debut with the Cup Series in Iowa?
Well, you missed a great race, and that's what was had at Iowa. You know, that was the surprising thing as well, is the amount of racing that was had at the short track. You know, when we went to other short tracks this season, a lot of talk has been about the fact that it's hard to pass the leader and hard to pass other cars in general. You know, you see a lot of passing that could happen at short tracks based off what we've seen in previous years. And with this new next-gen body, we've had great races on 1.5 and 2-mile racetracks and things of that nature. But these shorter tracks, it's been hard to necessarily get the product that NASCAR has been looking for. And when we were heading into Iowa, right, a track that we talked about that was only half paved in the corners. Some people were confused about that, did not know if the racing product would succeed with something like that, and it did. We saw 2 to 3 wide racing, and the track itself had a lot of characteristics heading into the corners, whether it's bumps or different types of grooves that you are able to race in. So for the racing product itself, it was a great one. And for the driver that pulled out the victory, it was Ryan Blaney. Blaney led a career high 201 laps in that race and ultimately dominated his way to win it. He had his whole family there as well, like 80 people, friends and family from the Blaney camp supporting him in that race, as I believe they said his mom was from that Iowa area. So good to see him sort of get that at her home track there. And what was interesting to me was Ryan Blaney maybe crossed my mind in terms of picking him to win outright. I know he's been due for a victory, as well as we've mentioned on the show before, but for him to dominate that race in terms of his speed that he showed in practice, they made a lot of adjustments as the day went from a day race to a night race there at Iowa as well. So he was a car that was really strong. Kyle Larson as well probably had the car to beat, but he put himself 3 wide and was way too aggressive for the car that he had, and ultimately wasn't able to finish that race in terms of on the lead lap because he got himself into a wreck, just pushing the car too hard there. So if it wasn't Larson, it was Blaney, and he capitalized.
What have you made of Larson coming out of trying to run the double in his performance since then?
Well, I think their performance has been similar to what we've seen in the first half of the regular season as well. Dominant. That's the type of team that Kyle Larson is on. And we were comparing him a lot to Denny Hamlin because they were the 1-2 punch, right? Well, Denny's kind of been slumping a little bit as of late. So for Kyle Larson to really step up these last few weeks and continuously show that he is a contender every race. To me, Jason, what's crazy about Kyle Larson is the fact that he will be in position to win these races, whether it's because of his own talent or the fastest car that they have in the field, but he'll either win or wreck out. And we saw that at Iowa this past weekend as well. He was putting the car 3 wide. It was a second lap coming off the restart on turn 4 there, putting it 3 wide because of, slower cars in front of him there as he restarted back in the pack. Maybe it was like a 2-tire to 4-tire situation there. And, that's what I do love about Kyle Larson, though. Obviously, I think he did say in the post-race press conference there that he was a little disappointed in his move because if he was a little bit more patient with that good of a car, he could have easily Kyle Larson was putting 2 seconds on Ryan Blaney when he was in front. Ryan Blaney was the next fastest guy. So that goes to show, the type of car, if Kyle Larson was able to keep it clean, he would be able to win this race. But, to recap there, I really do think Kyle Larson's the man to beat in the series right now.
We got about 30 seconds left in this segment. Who faces the most pressure right now to get on the board to try and make the playoffs?
Well, it's Kyle Busch, and that's
what
insane to say considering,
but it is.
He just, that bad luck has not changed, right? When we've kept asking this question and thinking about it, Joey Logano was in the mix as well, but he's even started to turn things around. Busch has been consistently having bad luck, not even having necessarily the worst runs or no speed at all when he comes to the racetrack. That has been the case at times, but he'll be in position for a top 5 finish, top 10 finish, to able to get those points where someone like Joey Logano and Bubba Wallace has been able to as well on the bubble, and he just hasn't been able to do it.
We're going to preview New Hampshire. That's next. More Tino on the other side. Odds and Ends wraps up the show in just about 10 minutes. Continue the conversation when it comes to NASCAR. We previewed did the recap on the Iowa Corn 350 with our man Tino Pattigno. Does a great job. Our NASCAR betting insider. You also hear him contributing over on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio as well. All right, let's preview this week's race in New Hampshire. You say it's the USA Today 301. Don't ask me why it's the 301. I'm sure there's some great reason for it. Could have just been the 300, but no, they had to call it the 301. Give me a sense for what this is about a mile track. First of all, for again, the novices out there, the differences between all these tracks. Last week we had the short track. This one not much bigger at only a mile.
Yeah, that's true. And it is a short, flat track as well. So that's where the flatness that comes into this racetrack puts us in a good perspective of
just
other
looking at the
tracks you can
highlights of
compare.
last year's race. This is in Loudon, by the way, New Hampshire. And you could see it really is a very flat track.
Yeah, and to touch on the 301 part as well, it's 301 laps. So that's
Right.
so that's why
Could have been 300.
301.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been.
It could have been. But yeah, so a mile long track and a flat track like you guys are seeing there on the highlights. And, something that is comparable to is Phoenix, Gateway, Richmond as well. And I think that's important to note, because when I mention those tracks, something that pops off in my mind as a NASCAR watcher and consumer every single week is knowing that those tracks kind of contribute more towards the veterans and the drivers that have a lot of experience. When we go to short flat tracks, it's really about how much your tire wear is going to, happen on the car and how much you're able to conserve and save throughout the car and making it better throughout the day with long green flag runs that we could potentially see here at New Hampshire. So that's something that we saw at this race last year. I'll actually be going there as well. I'll be in the stands as a fan. So if you guys see me in the gold jacket, be sure to say hi. And, I was at this race last season, like I mentioned, and it was a great way to sort of internalize everything that was going on. Martin Truex Jr. dominated that one, and he could do the same here this weekend.
Give me a sense for how drivers feel about coming off a race like Iowa into something like this. The reason I ask this is, in the golf world, you have the U.S. Open, which is one of the toughest tests in all of golf. And then the following week, you get the Travelers Championship, which is like playing on a Muni course compared to playing a U.S. Open. Not in terms of the way it's kept, it's gorgeous, but just in terms of the ease with which guys can score. From week to week in NASCAR, we have these different tracks and these different setups. How does this one compare? I know you mentioned how flat it is, just in terms of sort of what the drivers can expect.
Well, I think that's the big thing that you mentioned, right, was being able to go from track to track. And I think that's what makes this series in particular one of the top forms of motorsports because of that. I mean, these drivers are having to go from, road course to short track, from short track to, super speedway, back down to street race. I'll give you a, half mile, then I'll give you a 2 mile. Like, we're going from speeds of, 110 to 200, anywhere around that range, 150 most times. But to me, I think that's the biggest thing, is being able to adapt, coming with the right setup and coming with the right data in terms of being able to utilize that to win this race. And I think that's the biggest thing, for us NASCAR bettors and analysts out there as well, is knowing and understanding the different factors that go into each race, right? So I can think, okay, Martin Truex Jr. dominated this race last year, and in fact, the past 2 years as well. He's won the stages each and every time. He finished 4th in 2022, first last year, as I mentioned, led 426 laps. So to me, combined in both races, I think Truex is going to be a guy that has a strong run in this one. But that was last year. Things could change this year. We look at Phoenix and how they've sort of, the Toyotas and that new Toyota body, which teams were able to sort of make gains from that race last year to this year. And I think that's important to note, because that's what they can expect is, okay, what happened last year at this track? I think that is the biggest thing here, because what happened last year at New Hampshire, we may see most similarly happening this year because of the way that the cars are still set up. I don't think we'll see that much of a change. I still think it'll be a veteran track. I think the cars that were fast last year, Truex, Bell, Logano, Larson, I think those will still be the guys to beat at this track this season as well. So sometimes, as much as tracks and drivers and setups change, I think they can also stay the same. And especially the track too. It's been an older track, a flatter track, like I mentioned, and the tire wear will be the biggest thing. If that changes and isn't too much in this one, we'll see those same guys rise to the top.
So Christopher Bell, Martin Truex Jr., 450. Then Denny Hamlin at 500, Kyle Larson at 700, along with Ryan Blaney, who was last week's winner, and then Joey Logano at 850. Who do you like?
Well, out of those guys, Joey Logano gives me the best value. At plus 850, he finished second here in this race last season.
Kind of a
And he's gonna
hometown
have to
race for him, too, because it's close to where he grew up in Connecticut.
Yep. The
Place he
hometown
probably
track.
raced a ton when he was younger.
100%. And I think, track position is key in this one. 47% of the time, the winner starts inside the top 10. And I think Joey Logano will do that. I think they've been qualifying strong all throughout the year. If he can start inside the top 5, not only will this plus 850 number go down to probably 6-1, 7-1. So I would bet on this earlier on, before practice and qualifying happens. But even after, I think that puts Joey Logano in a better position to be able to win this race. And, I do like Bell and Truex. They're the favorites for the reason. Truex dominated this race last year. Bell won it in 2022. So I will be placing bets on them as well. But Joey Logano's my driver where I see the value. Even for a top 5 finish, he's plus 110 in this one.
Tino Pattigno. Check him out over the weekend. He'll have more picks once we find out starting positions and all of that good stuff. He is on X. Go and find him there. Always appreciate it, my friend. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you. Let's go win this one.
All right, just about time to put the wraps on this baby for Friday and for the week. Unless, of course, you're going to watch us on the weekend edition of Sports Wrap, which may or may not be available where you are watching this show. Some stations carry the weekday show, some carry the weekend show, some carry both. Hello to our friends watching in Masson Country, MASN, who are undoubtedly celebrating another series in which they beat my Yankees 2 out of 3. And they clobbered the Yankees on Thursday in the Bronx. What was it, 17-5 was the final? Luis Heel threw up his first dud of the season. Wasn't pretty. But anyway, if you can't watch the show every day, or maybe the DVR isn't working, or we're not on in your market every day, whatever it is, you can go and get our podcast. It's available, courtesy of our friends at Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, anywhere you get your podcasts. Go and check it out. Sports Wrap with Jason Page podcast available for you there. All right, without any further delay, time for some odds and ends. Odds and ends, Stephen A. Smith. I know a lot of people think that he's probably like my personal punching bag or something to that effect. But when you want to make yourself so part of the sports news, not just sports media news, but sports news, if you want to do that, then this is what you're subject to. When you want to be bigger than the brand, which is where I think we're kind of getting to now when it comes to Stephen A. Smith and ESPN, is that he thinks he's bigger than the brand. And if there's one thing we've learned throughout the history of ESPN, and I know this from briefly having worked with the company and knowing people there and having met with programmers there, nothing is bigger ultimately than the brand when it comes to ESPN. Whether it's the games that they have on, the relationships they have with various leagues, nothing is ever bigger than the brand when it comes to ESPN. And who knows? Maybe Stephen A. Smith will be the exception to that. Maybe Stephen A. Smith will be the guy that bucks that trend. Maybe he will be the guy that winds up breaking that mantra that nothing's bigger than the brand at ESPN. There's been various reporting out there that suggests Stephen A. Smith in his new contract wants, brace yourself, $25 million a year to continue working with ESPN. Now, it was also reported earlier this week that he wants to spread his wings, his tentacles. He wants to work on the NFL. He wants to be able to do more within the NFL framework that exists at ESPN. And I have said this many times before, and I'll say it again. The more you do, the more exposed you become. And Stephen A. Smith is the perfect example of this. If you take Stephen A. Smith and just have him talk about the NBA with other NBA insiders and an occasional player here or there, he's fine. You put him in the ring with more players, he becomes exposed as a guy that never played the game beyond the smallest levels of collegiate play. And he gets overshadowed and frankly dominated in those conversations. But in his role with First Take in general, he does all right. Does he still say some stupid, outlandish things? Yes. Go back to the Jaylen Brown stuff and sort of how he handled that situation. And there's been others, that we could sit here all day and point to. But think about it if you're ESPN. This guy's asking for $25 million a year. You've offered 18, which I'm sure would make him the highest paid by a mile between any of the sports networks that are out there. He wants 25. And if I'm ESPN at this point, I say, you know what? This is what you're getting. You're getting 18. And if you want more than that, you're welcome to go try and get it somewhere else on the open market. Because you're not getting $25 million. And here's the reason I think they can play that card. We've seen Stephen A. Smith without ESPN. There might be a little bit of blowback for ESPN if they didn't bring back Stephen A. Smith and just let him walk. There might be a little bit of blowback for that. But ESPN will always survive. ESPN will still always be the big dog. They may not have the cultural significance that they had, 25 years ago when it was Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick and SportsCenter and Stuart Scott and Rich Eisen and all these guys. They may not have that sort of significance, but they're still going to be the big dog. They're still going to be the biggest player in the game. Stephen A. Smith went to Fox Sports after leaving ESPN. How'd that go? I said it yesterday with Robert Littall on the show, and I will say this again. You take ESPN away from Stephen A. Smith. Notice how I said that. Take ESPN away from Stephen A. Smith. He's Chris Broussard with louder suits. Nothing more. That brand, the Stephen A. Smith brand, it'll still make money. He's got his audience and it's built in. So, he'll still make money. But if you think the Stephen A. Smith brand is going to thrive outside of the confines of ESPN, that ecosystem, you haven't been paying attention. And I think it's why Stephen A. Smith can only push so far. The only thing that takes him away from ESPN ultimately is ego, is hubris. Sometimes that can't happen, so maybe it will. We'll see how it plays out. Thanks, Tino Pattigno. Thanks to Kurt Helin. Thanks to you for watching all week. I'm Jason Page. We'll see you back here next week.